Today, what I did not like is that they didn't ask about the spitting in the face, that Amber Heard allegedly spit in her former assistant's face. Was she speaking and spit got on her, or did she do a, you know what? Why didn't they ask that? That would have been my answer. I'm not even a lawyer, and I would have asked that.
Let me tell you, you never know who you're going to bump into inside the courtroom. Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard. That was a true crime YouTuber, Molly Golightly, with some observations, talking about Amber Heard's former assistant, who was called to the stand and testified for Johnny Depp. Take a listen.
Everything from handling all of her dry cleaning, picking packages, mail, liaising with agents, other people in the industry, coordinating travel, making restaurant reservations, dealing with the staff, the vendors on the property, that sort of thing. I had a newsstand guy that was instructed to hold 2 copies of every magazine she appeared in. It was a newsstand on Sherbourne Avenue, just off La Cienega. He would hold them for me, and I would go approximately once a week to pick up whatever magazines Amber was featured in, 2 copies of each, which I would then store in her garage. She just got very angry with me one day because I hadn't quite made it downstairs to put them in the garage when she came home, and she went absolutely ballistic over that.
Can you please describe what you mean?
Screaming, yelling, abuse.
But it was abusive in your opinion?
Blind rage. Screaming over the phone. She screamed at me once in person, multiple times screaming at me over the phone. Barrages of abusive text messages, day and night, a lot of them in the middle of the night. I think you're aware. I think between 2 and 4 a.m. the barrage would start. That's what I'd wake up to. All incoherent, not really making sense, just basically someone to lash out at, no apparent reason to it. It was ongoing kick the dog kind of relationship with her sister, so it's really hard to pinpoint any specifics, but her poor sister was treated like the dog that you kick, basically. It was just so random and ongoing. You would never know when it was going to come left of centre. I do remember on one occasion when we were moving from part-time to full-time, and then the salary negotiations became a real bone of contention. And I specifically remember standing in her office where she leapt up out of her chair, put her face approximately 4 inches from my face. She was spitting in my face and telling me how dare I ask for the salary I was asking for, which was in fact approximately half of my regular annual salary. I was offering her that as a favour, and she felt that gave her the right to spit in my face. And there was a witness in the apartment at that time, by the way.
Who was at the apartment at the time?
A handyman, Hector Galindo. He was so mortified. He was so embarrassed to hear her speaking to me like that.
Did Miss Heard ever tell you that Johnny had hit her?
No. And there was never any damage to the apartment that I witnessed. There was never any aftermath of anything ever that I ever saw.
Now, you, of course, have no personal knowledge one way or the other whether Johnny was abusive to her, correct?
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Wow. Let's bring back in Court TV legal correspondent Chanley Painter. Chanley, give us a little more context here. This is Amber Heard's former assistant.
Right. She was hired by Amber Heard before she was a star in 2012. Kate James used a recruitment company, and by all accounts, she seemed like a very disgruntled former employee. That's how she came across. She had not only disdain for her former employer, Amber Heard, but also for the process, too. She had an attitude to the attorneys during her deposition. Another character inside the courtroom for sure, but her main theme and purpose of testifying was to really point at Amber Heard as someone who was extremely insecure, had a lot of emotional issues going on, and was verbally abusive to her as her employee.
All right, let's bring back in our doctors. We've got Dr. Nadim Karim, Dr. Wendy Walsh, Dr. Carol Lieberman with us. They're all in L.A. tonight. All right, Dr. Nadim Karim, what should we read into Amber Heard and the way she allegedly here treated her former assistant?
Well, I think we should read in whatever a potential juror is going to read, meaning a juror is going to hear this and say, hang on a second. Before, we know that Amber Heard was really a leading proponent of the Me Too movement, and rightfully so. She wrote an article and expressed herself in a way whereby she felt victimized, and rightly so. Now we have information that she's come forward and has really been violent, perhaps rageful, aggressive, angry, and that potentially, in a potential juror's mind, might skew their impression of her. And so I think what's going to be really interesting from a clinical perspective is to understand the mind of a juror when they come to having to make a decision about who Amber Heard really is. And notwithstanding anything relating to the Me Too movement, but just looking at her as an individual in terms of her specific behavior and her inability to de-escalate conflict, especially in the words of her former assistant. And I think that that's going to tell a lot in the mind of a potential juror in this case.
Dr. Wendy Walsh, your thoughts?
Well, this is all just trying to somehow convince the jury that Amber was bad, that Amber started the domestic violence so that they will have some sympathy for Johnny Depp and somehow say, well, she ruined his career. But here's what we do know, that victims of domestic violence, victims of emotional abuse, often exhibit mental health problems. Yes, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard had and have a traumatic bond. And not surprisingly, because of her personality issues, that she's going to have difficulty in relationships with all kinds of people. And by the way, this is not the only assistant in Hollywood to have been treated badly by a narcissistic actor, okay? It is a very common dynamic. But the real question here is, did she lie about his violence? And it has been well documented that she did not lie. And it doesn't matter if she started it. It doesn't matter if they had a bad relationship. It doesn't matter that she's an awful person, perhaps. And often that's evidence that she was abused, because that'll affect your mental health more than anything. What matters is that did she tell the truth? And, he has every right to leave. He didn't have to hit her. We have pictures of bruises and people testifying bruises. So this is not a courtroom where we're arguing whether domestic violence took place or not. We know it did. We're arguing whether she told the truth about it in a newspaper article. And I believe she did. Doesn't matter that she's an awful person to live with. Doesn't matter.
Well,
He still hurt her physically.
I believe that she didn't. I believe that she exaggerated this. And what's interesting is that what we're seeing is that this is a pattern that Amber has, not just with Johnny in terms of like what the couples counselor said, talking like a jackhammer, talking over him and all of that. But now her assistant talks about how she treated her sister, that Amber treated her sister like kicking the dog. And this assistant also talked about how Amber treated her mother. And she treated her mother in a really bad way, similarly bad way as well, that she was just this aggressive, generally aggressive and abusive. And I do not believe that, yes, neither of them were angels, but I certainly believe that that Johnny was the one who was more the victim, that Amber was the perpetrator of domestic violence in much greater, into a much greater degree.
With all due respect. With all due respect, when he sexually assaulted her with a liquor bottle, he was being a victim here?
Wait a minute. In court documents, it is reported that she threw a vodka bottle at him in Australia and injured his hand. And then this was a month after they were married, and it was right at this time that Elon Musk, she told the people in her building, it was Johnny's apartment, and she told the people who work in her building to let Elon Musk up. So she started this relationship, whatever that entailed. One could use their own imagination. A month after they were married, I think she was an opportunist. I think she was a gold digger. I think that she, I don't know if she ever loved Johnny. I think he loved her, but was it really love ever?
Right.
But I think that,
And if-
I think, you know, she actually, well, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in and say that the aspect of mutual abuse is now going to be established. Per the marital counselor, there was abuse on both sides. There's no excuse for any kind of sexual violence towards a woman or a man. Absolutely not. There's mutual abuse on both sides. Amber was rageful, had issues in terms of de-escalating conflict. In fact, probably provoked some of it and incited some of the reaction, and Johnny tried to walk away. Now, I'm certainly trying to be objective in my analysis by saying this. The bottom line is, in this case, is the extent to which Amber's inability to really de-escalate conflict, become rageful, angry, Johnny's reaction, and the push-pull that went into their own dynamic toxicity is resulting in a damage to Johnny's career. That's what we're here to discuss. And in my opinion, a jury is going to get an earful in terms of not just Amber being the victim of domestic violence, but really her personality characteristics, which we know are fixed, and the extent to which her inability to really maintain her mood, to de-escalate conflict, to incite an outcome where they're both going at each other's throats. A jury is going to want to know that to make an informed decision on the actual question, which is the damage to Johnny's career.
But when we have
All right, we've got our doctors on call tonight. Wendy, Dr. Wendy Walsh, I just have to cut you off for 1 second. We're going to go to a break. We'll come back. We've got a lot more to talk about. We've got our doctors here, but there was another doctor in the courtroom today as well talking about Johnny Depp and his drugs. That's next.